Since I was talking about hip flexion so much, let's do a workout when we utilizing the pelvic curl, when we utilizing the movement of the pelvis forward and backward on the femur, the thigh bone. So let's do pelvic tilts to bridges to roll up, and then let's challenge the pelvic tilt in cat-cow, and more importantly against the wall with the Pilates roll down. So let's start out face up, and let's bring the heels in line with the sit bones, heels pressed in, ball of the feet pressed in, toes pressed in, and let's start out in a neutral alignment, meaning there's some space under the low back. Chest is open, nose is pointing up, hands either by your side or keep it on your ASIS. And then let's do a couple of pelvic tilts. Knees in line with the hips and shoulder. Don't bring the knees out, don't bring the knees in. Now let's just move the pelvis over the femur backwards, coming into a posterior tilt, bringing the nose closer, bringing the pubic bone closer to the nose, squishing the imaginary blueberry under the mat, touching all lumbar, low back vertebrae into the mat. And from here, let's start tilting the pelvis forward over the thigh bone, coming back into a neutral alignment. So there's some space under the low back again. And from here, bringing the pelvis forward into an anterior tilt into a big mouse house, bringing the pubic bone closer to the mat. So again, the thigh bones are in space hold, not moving. Upper body is stable, not moving. It's only the pelvis rocking backwards and forward over the thigh bone. Stretching the hip flexors and the low back, and also mobilizing the vertebrae and mobilizing the hip joint. So the pelvic tilt is actually a pretty important exercise, and it's also a foundation for more complex movements. So just rocking the pelvis forward and back. This is the pelvic tilt. Now let's build on this and let's go into a bridge. So starting from an anterior tilt, big space under the low back, tilting the pelvis back to a neutral alignment, and from there into bringing the low back touching the mat, coming into a posterior tilt, and then the sit bones are gliding towards the knee, the hamstring is shortening, and lifting up into a bridge. Knees in line with the hips and shoulder, coming up as high as we can, vertebrae by vertebrae. The movement is slow and controlled. Hamstrings are short, come up as high as you can, and then start rolling down, vertebrae by vertebrae. The pelvis is still in, the hamstrings are still shortened, the pelvis is still in posterior tilt. As long as you are coming all the way down, touching L4, L5, last vertebrae, and then the pelvis lands, and this is when we release our sit bones. The hamstrings are coming into a lengthened position as we are rolling the pelvis into a forward anterior tilt. Okay, let's do one more of this. So coming from an anterior tilt, a forward tilt back to neutral, thigh bone is in space hold, the pelvis rolls over the femur, lengthening the hip flexors, strengthening the hamstrings and butt as we're rolling up. mobilizing the vertebrae, mobilizing the hip joint. Come up as high as you can. And then keep the pelvis in posterior tilt, and then come down, slow and controlled. Low back touches before the hips land, and roll into a forward tilt. Stretching the low back, lengthening the hamstrings. Okay, so let's do next is roll up. Same thing, everything is in space hold, legs are stable. The pelvis will roll over the thigh bone as we are rolling up. Flex the foot, squeeze the knees, inner thighs together, arms out in front, lift the head, and start rolling up, slow and controlled, vertebrae by vertebrae. Exhale as you roll up and come up as high as you can. Lift up, and now roll the pelvis backwards, coming into a posterior tilt, and then roll down vertebrae by vertebrae. Pelvis to low back to mid back, shoulder blades, and the head comes down last. And again, let's just do two. Lift the head, start curling forward, slow and controlled. Exhale as you lift, vertebrae by vertebrae. The pelvis changes over the thigh bone. The hamstrings lengthening here, right? This is what limits forward bending, the hamstring tightness. Sit up tall, and then on the way down, roll the pelvis, coming into a posterior tilt, touching the low back, the mid back, shoulder blades, and head. Okay, next let's do cat-cow, which is another form of pelvic tilt on all fours. The same principles apply. This is coming from a neutral alignment. The pelvis, the sit bones initiate the movement by coming into a posterior tilt by bringing the sit bones closer to the knee, shortening the hamstring, coming into posterior alignment, curling the pelvis down, coming into lumbar flexion, into thoracic flexion, so chest flexion maybe, flexing the neck, and then flexing the head. Keeping the hamstrings short, and start lifting the head, coming into capital or head extension, cervical or neck extension, thoracic or chest expansion, to lumbar extension, low back extending, and then rising the sit bones to the ceiling. So same pelvic tilt, but in a different plane. Also here is the movement a lot harder than doing the pelvic tilts or bridges on the mat. Let's do one more. Curling, the movement starts with curling the pelvis down. Sit bone glide from the ceiling, from a lumbar extension into neutral, into a posterior tilt or into lumbar flexion. Curling the pelvis down over the femur, coming into a thoracic flexion, pushing the floor away, and then cervical or neck flexion, and then flexing the head. On the way up, extending head extension, because the movement starts with the head. Then neck extension, chest expansion, thoracic expansion, lumbar, and then lastly the butt comes up. Sit bones are rising to the ceiling. Giving a stretch, deep stretch in the low back and deep stretch in the mid back or thoracic area. Okay, and last one for pelvic tilt, when the stakes are a lot higher. Standing, actually we can also do standing pelvic tilts, a lot harder before we go into against the wall, the Pilates roll down. So same thing, but harder, tilting the pelvis in the standing position, just playing with the pelvis over the thigh bone, bringing the sit bones closer to the knee as we're curling the pelvis, becoming into flexing the low back or posterior tilt, and from there bringing it back into lengthening the hamstrings, tilting the pelvis forward and coming into extending the low back, stretch of the low back. Curl the pelvis forward, a lot harder than pelvic tilts face up, or also harder than the cat-cow. Shortening the hamstrings, sit bone glide towards the knee, and then the pelvis tilts backwards. It's important I think it's really important, pelvic tilt is really important also for body awareness, and able to control the movement, able to understand how the body really works. So yeah, these are standing pelvic curls or pelvic tilts. And then last one, hardest, the roll down against the wall. So for that, I think I'm going to use this wall space. Start out by having the feet further away from the wall, head against the wall, and posterior tilt, so low back against the wall. When your low back is tight and not very flexible, not very mobile, this also can be a really good stretch when someone just starts out. And the goal here is really simple, just like in sit-up, but he'll be rolling down. So lift the head and start curling forward, vertebrae by vertebrae, moving your upper body down towards the lower body and touching each vertebrae against the wall. Roll all the way down and then come back up. And then on the way up too, try to touch each vertebrae against the wall. You may need to move the butt out from the way. Again, when you first start out, this may be super hard, but over time, this gets easier like everything. So each vertebrae goes against the wall. And when you get more flexible, when you get stronger, you can bring the heel closer to the wall. The stakes are increasing. Same principles, shin tuck to roll down. Slow and controlled, vertebrae by vertebrae. Push the butt away from the wall, create some space in there. Roll all the way down, hamstrings lengthening, pelvis rolls over the femur, and then come back up a lot harder when the feet are closer, and then roll up. And let's bring it closer again. So I think I'm like an inch away from the wall. This is hard. Chin tuck to roll down. Move the butt out, roll forward. And then roll back up. And bring it just a hair closer. Stand against the wall. And start with chin tuck to, so capital flexion, flexing the head, cervical flexion, thoracic flexion, lumbar flexion. I don't think I have this down. There I have it. Lumbar flexion. Can't come up. So lumbar flexion to lumbar extension, thoracic extension, cervical extension, capital extension. Let's do one more. I like to play with this. So chin tuck, roll down. I got it. There, and then come back up. A lot of strain on the hamstrings, but it's fun to play with. So pelvic tilt. Pelvic tilt to bridges, to roll up, to cat-cow, to standing pelvic curl, and the Pilates roll down, feet completely against the wall. Sticks are a lot higher, sticks are higher and higher as we progressing. I think it's important to play with it, it's fun to play with it, so give it a try, and actually leave me a comment how hard you found this. Thank you.